Here we go. Set?
You got the. I wrote at the bottom. Okay, thanks.
We're set, right, Deb?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Glad you can make it. Let's start it off with a motion to accept the minutes of the previous meeting. All right, Paul, do I have a second? Cassie, second. All those in favor? Aye? Aye?
Aye.
All right. We'll go right on. Joe, we've got you on today.
Yep, here I am. I just have a couple of budget amendments. First one is related to diesel fuel. With the new personnel that came in at the beginning of the year, all of the diesel costs were paid out of one fund. I just want to get them allocated to the proper funds. So I need $340 moved into the 8130.427, and I need $2,111 moved into the 8131.427, both moved from 8120.
Do I have a motion to do that?
Make the motion.
Cassie, motion, Paul, second. Any discussion on it? All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, go ahead, Joe.
Second one is to allocate some funds for new phones, again, related loosely to the new staffing that we have. The phones are 25 years old, outdated. Some have numbers that don't work. The displays are shot for caller ID. We just want to upgrade the software, the phone system itself to move us forward. So it's $600 coming out of fund balance and into 8120.2 line.
Is there a motion for that?
I'll make that motion.
Paul made the motion, Daryl seconded it.
Yeah, does this, real quick question, does this take you to a VoIP configuration? So if your phone's that old, you're on legacy?
No, we don't have that yet. We don't have that available to us yet down at the plant.
Still second.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, opposed? All right, pass. Anything else, Joe?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm gonna log off if that's okay.
Does anybody have any questions for Joe before he's gone? All right, thank you, Joe.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, Deb?
Good morning. So I first want to talk about household waste collection or hazardous waste collection day, but Brian's not here and I know he wants to weigh in on that. He's coming in a few minutes, right?
Yep.
So we'll go to the shoulder machine. We went out to bid for a shoulder machine. Contractor Sales won the bid and we would like to award it to them for $113,528.
Is there a motion to accept the bid?
I'll make that motion.
Paul makes the second. Daryl second it. Cassie second it. Anybody have any questions, discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Matt, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I thought we, put X amount of dollars in certain things for the budget for this year. Was that in the budget, out of the budget, part of a bigger package, or did we?
This was in March, we transferred 30,000 from the capital projects to DM with resolution 114.
Okay. Did we have an estimate back then on what the number was?
It was more than that, I believe it was 120.
120 was the number we used. Thank you.
Any other questions? All in favor of the motion? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, on to the next.
In February, we talked about fuel system upgrades. We solicited quotes for this project and would like to award. This is a funky-ish one.
It's one of the, you only have one person that's,
So there's only two vendors that are licensed and authorized by the equipment manufacturer to do the project. DPW spent a considerable amount of time trying to solicit, quotes from both available vendors. Was only successful in getting a quote from one. It was then handed over to my staff. My staff has spent the last month to 6 weeks trying to get a quote from the other eligible vendor, and we have not been successful in getting a quote from them. And this is something we do need to move on. So, what's the price on the,
140,362.
so it's $140,362. But we can't bid it, because of the proprietary nature. So for the terms of the procurement policy, I think what we would need is a resolution from the committee to accept the quote from S&W.
Yep.
And deem it a sole source purchase.
do we move to waive things, Chris, or just do it?
As long as you deem it a sole source, that gets it in the right category that we've done our considerables.
All right, does anybody want to make that motion?
I will.
Okay, Cassie's made it, Daryl has seconded it. Discussion? Dan?
Would you refresh my memory, what is it for, the 140,000?
This is to bring the, tanks in compliance with the DEC regulations and to upgrade so that it closes the loop in IT. Remember how the computer that we use is like the AOL?
So is this all just electronic basically, or is there actually tanks gonna be replaced too?
No new tanks. It is, some sensors for the tanks. So there's some hardware that goes on our existing tank infrastructure, and then the majority of it is, technology, hardware, and software.
Did we have enough budgeted for that?
We had money transferred in February from capital projects. So, yes.
Any other questions?
We cannot hear Matt.
I've lost,
Can't hear anybody.
They can't hear you.
Yeah, how about now? Somebody say something in the room.
Matt's still muted.
How about now?
I'm supposed to be muted, aren't I? 'Cause weren't we using EPS? No, you just open.
Can you guys hear Matt or Dave?
Can you hear me?
I can hear him.
I can hear them.
That's gotta be working.
But he muted the whole room.
No, oh, the whole room muted? Okay. You want Matt to repeat what he was saying, Dana?
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Maybe no.
Can you hear me now? So the first question was whether we were voting on just setting aside the rules, because of the sole source, or whether they're motioning to include awarding the quote. And the answer was both. And the question is, does it go to finance, or does it have to be taken care of right here, right now? And the answer was, it's being taken care of right here, right now.
Dana?
Chris, is there a concern that we only got the one response? And you're kind of secretive about how you're wording that. Is there a concern that the one response is still very high and that we're not getting a competitive response?
No.
No, and I apologize if the perception was that we were being secretive. The other vendor we tried for over 2 months to get a response from them. They've indicated that they're so busy, they just don't have time to give us a response, and this is something we need to move forward on to bring our system into compliance. So I think we've done, as far as like a comptroller audit of the purchase, I feel very confident that I can say we've done our due diligence. I mean, I have pages and pages of emails and conversations from my staff to the other vendor trying to get a quote from them without success, and I know Deb does as well from her.
So without a second quote, do we have a sense if this is a fair price?
It is under what we had budgeted for it, so it was under what we had worked with IT and, to come up with a cost for.
And like my staff went through and spec'd out some of the sensors individually as far as what we could provide. Now, we can't buy the software, right, and the technology part, but we could buy some of the sensors, and it would be more expensive for us to buy the sensors individually and then try to install them and then have the other company bring it in. So as far as what we're able to ascertain, yes, we're under budget on what we thought the price would be, and we're ahead of what we can do individually on the components that we can purchase individually.
And these components are required that we have the upgrade to these components. This is a requirement or something that we think is a good idea. I'm trying to figure out if we did not do this, would DEC cite us or something?
No, I don't think that that's the case. I don't think it's DEC, as for our petroleum bulk storage permit, is not telling us you must buy XYZ sensor rather. The idea is the current system is very antiquated, so there's some issues with that. But as an example, if the computer is telling us that we've dispensed 100 gallons on the current system, but the tank level goes down 50%, which might be 500 gallons, there's no way for us to know that. The system that we're upgrading to keeps real time how many gallons are in the tank and how many gallons have been dispensed. So if only 100 gallons has gone through the dispenser and yet the tank level has dropped 500 gallons, we'll be notified long before we get to the 500 gallons. So the idea is by investing in this money up front, we're trying to avoid the costs or the potential costs of a cleanup should there be a rupture or spill or leak in a tank, because we'll be notified almost immediately once the discrepancy between gallons dispensed and gallons on hand exceeds the margin.
Okay, that leads to another question. So if a snowplow is fueling up at 3 a.m., who is monitoring that would be notified that the fuel is continuing to come out even though there's not a vehicle there and you're going to have a spill? Who would be notified of it? You're having a big expense so that somebody would know it, but at 3 a.m., who would know it?
We haven't configured the system yet because we don't have it. There will be email and text alerts, I believe. That would likely be sent to the superintendent, the general foreman, probably the foreman of the barn. I wouldn't be surprised if it gets sent to public safety and or IT.
Okay, but this isn't going to be so problematic if there was a 5-gallon difference. It's going to wake people up, is it?
No.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we'll vote on the motion. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
aye,
Opposed? Brian's on now. Deb, if you wanted to go ahead.
So Brian, we waited for you to talk about the hazardous waste collection day. We wanted to apply for a grant. It's a 50% grant, but there's a cap. So, Chris thought that perhaps we should consider setting it up contingent on funding, because I can't get answers from DEC about whether the funding is there right now. It says in an email that it is, but that's about a month old. So, is there any interest in doing a household hazardous waste collection day? We did one a few years ago. I talked to Warren County. They did one, a few years ago, and it was expensive, like ours was. But then they did one every year after that, at least one every year after that. They actually do 2 every other year, and it gets much cheaper after that. So we feel that this would be a good thing to do, but I wanted input on
Dana?
it.
Deb, if my memory serves right, it was up to $25,000 is what the grant was. So if we exceed that, then we're on the hook for the additional, it's 50% up to $25,000, I believe. And I think last time we did it, we exceeded our 25,000 half. I don't remember the amount. If anybody remembers, it was.
I think we ended up being around 30.
Yeah, I think it was right around 30 something.
I mean, it was very well attended last time, I believe. I was there helping. It's a very good thing to do, but do we have the money? That's always the problem. Do we have the money do we have $30,000 on our end to put towards it? I have a feeling no, since we just spent $140,000 on a fuel sensor, $113,000 on a shoulder machine. I don't know where you're going to find that $30,000.
Anybody else? Brian?
Yeah, that's kind of what I got a couple of months ago, was the fact that, we're talking about where we're gonna make cuts, and I think this is something, we've only done it once. I think we could wait a year or two if we had to. I hate to think we cut somebody's position and put them out of a job just to make this happen this year when we could have waited a year. Some of this just doesn't fit for the situation right now in my mind. I agree that it's a good thing and it's nice to do, but expecting that money's coming for the state for anything, to me is just is a dreamland. I don't see this. The state isn't even paying the things they're supposed to be paying. Why would they pay something extra? I just don't see any money coming. In my mind, I wouldn't even entertain it.
Anybody else have any comments? Does anybody feel the urge to go forward, or should Deb wait on this for a year?
Recommend to wait. Again, concur with the statements about it's a good thing to do. Resources being what they are, perhaps we wait.
Dana?
I also seem to remember back when we did it, there's discussion that maybe we'd think about doing this every 5 years. Has it been 5 years, or are we a little bit early?
I would say a little bit
About
early.
3 maybe,
Yeah,
or 4?
probably 4.
Thank you.
Sounds like Deb, they wanna hold on that.
Okay. So I do have a question about budgeting for it, because this is a grant. We can't budget for it, right? Al?
What's it for next year for it?
I don't think
For a
so.
match?
So what you could do is you could budget our appropriation. So you could put $25,000 aside, in an appropriation. Then if the board decides to go forward with it next year and you're successful getting the grant, you would then at that point recognize $25,000 in revenue and an additional $25,000 in appropriation to come up with a $25,000 revenue against a $50,000 appropriation.
So we can put the money in for that then.
You could.
Dana?
No, you can't. You can't budget for money you can't spend. I mean,
So that's why we're not allowed to budget for grants, because you can't, because you don't know you're gonna be able to spend it?
no, not all grants, but this particular one, we're saying we don't have the money to match the grant, but go ahead and budget for it. I mean, Brian, please weigh in.
I'm with you, Dana. I wouldn't budget for it when we don't have the money to match it, and we don't expect theirs to even come. That's where I'm at. Unless somebody else has information that says that it's a sure thing. I don't see either one, either side.
All right, no on the hazardous waste collection day. So, Al, everybody, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we are going to have a Schedule A. We don't have it yet, but we hope to have it by finance for the County Route 10, the one bridge that Chris affectionately refers to as
The burrito bridge.
for $120,000. We are on the hook for 5% of that, but do we send it to finance if we don't have it, or can I just bring it up at finance if we do have it?
I mean, I think what you could do is, I think you've given the Public Works Committee a heads up. I don't know that there's a motion for them to pass because we don't have the Schedule A yet. But then if we have the Schedule A prior to finance, we can bring it up at that point.
Okay. So the next thing is that, we need a lift to replace one of the lifts in the carpool. So we were hoping to get permission to do that. We have 3 quotes. It's leaking, the lift cylinders are leaking, and the arms are fatigued and bending, and when the arms bend, it's time to replace it. So the quote that was the lowest was $15,692.50.
And that's coming out of what, Deb?
So the only thing that we could find where this could come out of, that, I mean, there may be other places that I'm not aware of, but is out of the 2070 that we were not allowed to spend. So we would have to have permission to spend out of that.
So as a reminder to the committee, there were 5 or 7 cruisers.
5.
So there were 5 sheriff's cruisers that were in the 2020 adopted budget to be purchased. When things slowed down in March, obviously we held off on that. We worked with the sheriff, and the sheriff has decided that we could forgo the purchase of those 5 cruisers for 2020. So in her .2 vehicles line within carpool is approximately $170,000, I think off the top of my head, that was budgeted for those cruisers that will not be spent this year. So if the committee is amenable to her moving forward, it would be a request to authorize the purchase of the $16,000 lift. She can move the .2 money from the vehicles line to the equipment other line with a Brian letter because they're both .2s.
Jay,
Yeah, go ahead, Gad.
wouldn't this be a safety issue anyway? And unfortunately, even if we don't want to spend the money for safety purposes, it seems we have to spend the money on this.
Brian?
Yeah, I think whenever you're not buying new stuff, you're gonna do more maintenance, and this is one of the things that's crucial to doing maintenance on these cars. So I would think this is something, I'll make a motion to move this.
I'll second it.
I have a motion, a second by Kathy. Any more discussion? Dan?
Yeah, when you take these cars, or you don't buy these cars, does it mess up your carpool for rotation? In other words, do you need that 170,000 left in there to catch up in another year on carpool, or is it gonna be a snowball effect? In other words, if we're not buying our cars like we're supposed to?
So yes, you're right. It is not ideal to go a year without buying cruisers. That puts us behind the curve, without a doubt. And perhaps the preference would be to leave the $170,000 unspent to roll in fund balance within the fund. I think that would be ideal. But to the points that were made by Mr. Campbell and Mrs. Stedler, unfortunately, I think this is a situation where what we've been told is that the current lift will not pass inspection, and we need that lift to continue to service the existing carpool fleet. So, it's not ideal, but I think our best solution at this point is to dip into some of the savings we've made through not purchasing the cruisers in order to purchase a new lift that will serve our needs.
Bob, did you have a question?
Yeah, when I was lecturing at the State Police Academy, I would always tell them to make sure that they remembered when they were in a high-speed chase that they were on tires bought by the lowest bid. I would like to know, of these bids, is there a significant quality difference in slips? Because that's a pretty significant usage and also safety issue. Is the lowest bid the best lift, or the most effective lift?
Yeah, we're confident in the bids that this one is adequate, if not. It's very similar to all the other bids, and it was only slightly lower than the other bids, so they were all apples to apples.
Okay.
I hate to do it to you, Deb, I just have to say quotes. Bids is a very specific term, and these aren't bids. And I know you didn't mean it.
Well, I said that. So.
No, it's fine. I just wanted everybody to know we did not bid this.
Brian?
It's $16,000. It's below the bid threshold. We did it according to the procurement policy. You got 3 written quotes.
Yeah, so just to remind everybody, we moved 360,000 back to carpool that we never put in to begin with, and took out. So that still has to be moved. We're not gonna be short here for a few minutes, on money for sure. But like I said, when you're not buying vehicles, the maintenance is twice as important because you're trying to make everything last. So this is one of those things that's hopefully going to be used to make all these cars last. And the same token, back to where Dan was going, on cars not being purchased, we do, however, have, it should be our first set of DSS cars coming back into the pool, which we already own. So that helps. The timing actually couldn't have been better if we had to do something like this, because the pool isn't going to be hurt near as much. But with that being said, we still need to make sure we get back on track, because these are the things that you cut back when you have to, but you don't want to. And that's like I said, when you make cuts, remember that money ends up going back sometime unless you find a different way of doing things. And until we find a different way, that money will have to be put back. Along with that, we talked about leasing cars, and that brings up a part of that discussion that we're not going to go into today, I'm sure. But here's a case where if we had a lease contract, we'd be paying that lease every year, no matter good times or bad. And so right now, instead of holding off and not spending money, if you had a lease contract, you'd be paying a lease. So here we are holding back money on 7 cars or 5 cars, whatever, because we can. Whereas if you were in a lease agreement, that wouldn't be the case. So just to pass that on.
Any more, Matt?
This is a little, off topic here, Chris, but, so I got a couple of rebates from my insurance company because obviously they're figuring during the pandemic I'm not driving as much. I'm sure you don't have the data, but can we assume that since March to now, perhaps we've used the current cruisers less because there's less people out and less stuff going on, that people are not getting as far behind as we normally would have, or is that they're going to travel those miles if they're running those shifts no matter what?
So to a certain extent, we did do fewer miles, and it's the area in which we saved with the cruisers was inmate transports to local courts because courts were shut down. That's not a significant portion of our miles. Your standard road patrol shifts were still being run. Those deputies were still out there. Those miles were still driven. We did experience, and this is a somewhat mixed bag, we experienced a savings in the general fleet and carpool because when our departments were shut down, the vast majority of the vehicles were not being driven. That's good for general fund because we weren't paying mileage. That's actually somewhat bad for carpool because that's decreased revenue into carpool. Now, there was decreased wear and tear on those vehicles because they weren't being driven. However, you still have your, if you kind of go back to Economics 101, and your fixed costs are still your fixed costs, and we're not generating enough revenue to cover those fixed costs when the cars aren't driving. So it's a mixed bag on what the shutdown did.
Carpool, if those are being driven less, for all the reasons you pointed out, they may not need to be replaced quite as often. It may bump that out a little bit, which may provide an opportunity to maybe to replace the cruisers a little sooner, perhaps.
It may. Unfortunately, what tends to happen to us here in the Northeast is that because our shop, and I will say this unequivocally, our shop does a tremendous job maintaining our vehicles. It's not the miles that kill us, it's the number of winners, right? I mean, we can get 300,000 miles out of a vehicle because these guys are doing the preventative maintenance and they're fixing things when they come up. The issue really for us is that the bodies rot out just because of the Northeast winters. So, yeah, I think we saved a little bit on mileage. Maybe we can eke in, an extra year out of the cars, but in general, the cars tend to rust apart on us is really our biggest issue.
Are we ready to vote on the motion? Al?
Go ahead, Chairman, I just have something to add afterwards.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said, go ahead with your vote, and then I have a comment afterwards.
Yeah, I'm trying to be glass half full.
I know.
But afterwards, be glass half empty, so.
All right.
Offset what I wanted to say.
All those in favor of the motion, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, go ahead, Al.
The only thing that I wanted to add to the conversation is I have an affection for fund balance, probably more than the average bear. But we've also seen the cost of kicking the can. And to Mr. Shaw and Mr. Campbell's point, maybe we should at least consider buying like 2 cruisers this year instead of 0.
I'll second that.
Dan?
Yeah, I wanted to ask this question earlier, but it would be a distractor. I'm not clear, 15,000, I understand for the lift out of there, but that would only prevent you from buying one vehicle. Why aren't we spending the money we budgeted in carpool and buy the rest? That wasn't
Like
clear.
half of one vehicle, actually.
Yeah, so it wasn't clear why we aren't buying the vehicles for carpool.
I believe because we put it on hold when we didn't know where we were gonna end up here 2 months ago. So if you guys wanna go forward in doing 2, 3, 4, you could discuss that right now.
Well, then, my follow-up question is, this money can't be used anywhere else, it's gotta stay in carpool fund, correct? Unless we moved it?
Yes, that's an accurate statement.
Well, to me, it would've been, and Deb, I don't want to start a fight. I'd rather not, if we were nervous about this, I'd rather not have bought a shoulder machine and bought the cars, because I can see the cars, if we fall out of this rotation again, it's gonna cost us big time in the long run. The shoulder machine is gonna cost headaches, and there is gonna be another cost, and I understand that. But I'm just wondering if we're approaching these right, and that's just a question if everybody feels comfortable. I don't have any more to say, but I think that carpool is kind of important to keep it up and maintain it.
Brian, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I think a department had brought this to us to give that up. So I guess I'd kind of trust in what our department heads are willing to do. Since he served, I didn't have that discussion with him, Chris did, so you'd have to ask Chris. But due to the fact that that's what the sheriff brought was, hey, we can hold off because we're not in bad shape right today. But like Dan said, it can't leave the carpool, so it's still there to buy the cars. You're just slowing down how fast the money leaves. So I guess until the sheriff came to me and said he still wanted 2 or 3 cars, we just buy them next year. But, that's kind of, it's just like the same as the paving. I mean, yeah, with the highway money doesn't leave the highway fund either, but, we did decide to pull back on paving and we still got to catch up on that. So I see them one as the same. I see the money as having to be put back. So I don't know why the argument would be any different for one than the other. To me, I see them both the same.
Dave, you had a comment?
I was just gonna say that, here we are in September, and we still don't know what effect the state's gonna have on us. If any of the balances here, we suspect they're gonna have some impact on us. But as we potentially get to December, we could reevaluate this and see where we're going forward and maybe open up buying the cars this year at that time instead of just pushing it off the next year or so. I think there may be another evaluation point that we can look at sometime in December.
Matt?
Hey, Al, what's the status of the carpool fund itself? Because that's kind of a major factor on whether we decide to buy these or not and roll it back into fund balance. What's the status of carpool?
I don't have that in front of me, Matt. I know that it's stronger now because you replaced the 360,000. That action happened because we closed 2019 considerably lower than we thought we were going to, which is why you took the corrective action to add the 360. To Dan's point about the shoulder machine real quick, that comes out of road machinery. So that decision doesn't actually affect this decision. And my only suggestion about buying at least 2 cars this year wasn't to disrespect the sheriff's decision. It's the cost of kicking the can because, as Brian mentioned earlier, if you don't buy them this year, it's some year in the future, you're going to play catch up. And I guarantee you the cost of those cars is not going down. So you're going to increase the cost in the out years if you wait. That was my only concern. I think you can safely buy 2 cars without affecting carpool. And to Dave's point, state aid has no effect at all on carpool or road machinery. So this decision isn't based on anything the state's doing.
Anybody else have any? Matt?
I just got a suggestion, Jake. We could move the idea of buying 2 cars to finance, and then vet it this afternoon in public safety with the sheriff with his input, and then revisit this in finance with a little bigger group to see if we want to move forward with that or not. Just a suggestion. I don't know if that has any
I'll second that.
support.
So you just made a motion apparently because the second came out.
Okay, a motion to purchase 2 cars, 2 sheriff's patrol vehicles out of carpool and move it to finance.
Right.
Right, Deb?
Is there any discussion on that
Don't forget
motion?
the discussion's gonna be this afternoon too.
Correct.
I
Anybody
think-
else have a comment? Go ahead, Darrell.
Yeah, bringing it into a little bit different forum, a larger perspective overall with the budget. Agree with everything that was said about the carpool and deferred costs.
And that'll give me a chance to give you some numbers.
And then it can be informed by a larger set of discussions. So we're not pressed. I don't think there's an immediacy to the decision today. We need to make a decision probably in the coming month or so that we can, take care of it before the year closes. But a little more discussion might be helpful and in greater context with the finance.
Any other comments? Questions? Okay, let's vote on Matt's motion. Is everybody in favor of purchasing 2 cars, moving it to finance, and after listening to the discussion in safety? I'll say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Hey,
Opposed? Okay. Anything more, Deb?
Yep. As you remember, last month, we talked about collaborating with the Hudson Falls PD on, fleet maintenance of 8 of their vehicles. So I got more information. It's just basically lake maintenance. It's billed out of our TMC program monthly, and we think it'll take about no more than 20 hours a year. So we didn't know if it would be okay to go forward with that pilot program. We were gonna try to do it for a year and see how it went and report back.
Comments?
Chris, is there still a shared services program out there, or did that fall with COVID?
There is, it fell with COVID.
Just checking.
Yep.
Yeah, I've talked to my colleagues. None of us are submitting shared services plans this year. Nobody has gotten reimbursed for any of their shared services stuff. We're up to our elbows in alligators. Nobody has time to dance to the governor's tune this year.
Okay.
This would be a fantastic candidate, however.
So it's the program where they would bring their vehicles in, we do the service for them, then we bill them back for whatever our time,
Yeah,
material.
everything, yep.
Be interesting if that came to a total of around $16,000 for the year, wouldn't it, Dan? We kind of
Well,
Any other
I move that we move forward with this pilot program and let Deb's team try it out.
Okay, we have a motion by Cassie. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Daryl seconds it. Paul seconds it. Any more comments? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
So, we have an employee going out for surgery on September 15th. And normally, Melissa is authorized to approve temporary positions, but because of the way things are different with filling positions, they wanted us to bring it to committee. So this, if we could do this, it actually works out really well for us this year because we have a retirement in November. So this temporary position would be training somebody, and then we could, if that works out, we could appoint them for the full-time position in November, which is only 2 months away.
Winter is coming.
So we would like
It gives you
permission
an
to,
opportunity to see if they fit. Yeah, it
If
gives
they
you an
what?
opportunity to
Yep.
see if they fit the
Yep.
program, what you're after. I mean, that's a nice way to be able to do it.
yeah, it's pretty interesting timing, so we're hoping you approve this.
So is there a motion to hire?
I'll move that.
Okay, Brian moves it. Is there a second?
I'll
Second.
second it.
I got Daryl and Cassie and Paul. Dave, you got a question?
I got a question. So we're actually giving approval only for the temporary position, correct?
Correct.
Yep.
And when we get word on the retirement, then we have to go through the personnel cycle
Yep.
to get that approval. Thank you.
Yeah, we're not gonna slide them in there or anything anyway.
Dana?
Play by the rules.
Is there a shadow lurking in the background here?
No.
Chris says no.
Thank you.
Matt?
Well, it's not a change in the staffing pattern.
No.
We're not adding, we're just, the person's gonna be out in surgery, you're gonna hire somebody to cover that for a couple of months, and then when that person retires, hopefully that person will then take over for the retired person.
Yep, the retirement really has nothing to do with the ask, it's just kind of an added perk to the timing of the ask.
Yeah, Paul has a question, but what's the title, Deb, for
Highway workers too.
highway worker two? Okay. Go ahead, Paul.
So the barn that the person's going out for surgery, you'll have to hire a temporary person in that loop, slide them into the position after the person retires, or give them a chance to move into the loop, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yep, fortunately, this is in the same area.
It's an overlapping loop.
Oh, good.
Well, how is that person picked to fill the person who's retiring, is it through a list?
The person that's picked, so if you are working as, say, a summer person, a temporary summer person, you have like seniority over other people to be hired for a position that opens. So this would be a similar thing.
I guess I wanna avoid, we hire somebody temporarily for a couple of months, and then when it comes to fill the person's retiring, that person isn't the top eligible person. Can we avoid?
They would be at
Can we
that
avoid
point.
that somehow?
Yeah, they would be at that point because they would be the only temporary position because we would not have any summer help at that point.
And I
And
think
so-
maybe what would help Mr. Hicks on this one is that this is not a civil service competitive position. There is no list, there is no test.
That's the last thing to mention.
Dave, did you have?
That was the same thing.
Okay, all right. Any more comments, questions? All in favor of the motion, aye?
I have
Aye.
a comment.
Oh, who did I miss that had a
Aye.
comment?
I had, Paul, I had a comment, and the comment is, I think it's great that they do a temporary person in September. It gives the person time to learn the truck before the snow. A lot of times they hire people, on the first snowstorm, they start replacing people. And to give someone time in a truck is very useful for when winter gets here. That was my only comment, and I agree with filling the temporary position.
Okay. Anybody opposed on it? All right. Okay.
So I called the state today and the bids for salt stayed flat. Surprise.
That's a victory.
And we have completed 7.4 miles of paving projects now, and we're working on County Route 30, which is 3.4 miles. And, my last thing on the list was, I was hoping you'd float me 20%. Oh, come on, don't laugh at me.
Okay, committee?
Debbie?
That was a valiant effort.
Go ahead, Cass.
Has there been any confirmation from the state? I know in some years they allow you to carry your CHIPS money forward, but I had heard there was discussion that this year the CHIPS funding wouldn't be allowed to be carried forward, and if you didn't use it, you lost it. Whereas PAVE New York and you couldn't carry forward, and EWR you couldn't carry forward, but CHIPS you've been able to in the past. I heard there was some discussion you weren't going to be able to carry that forward.
We did not speak about that at the county highway superintendent's meeting last month. We talked about the 80%. There's really, you get different answers no matter what region you call throughout the state, so there's no consistency. I would hope that they wouldn't take the 20%, but it would fall into their desire to have more money, right?
It would, and so Kathy, unfortunately at this point, with regard to the state, we just have no certainty about anything. I don't necessarily know that the state knows what they're doing. I don't know this for certain with CHIPS, but I know how most of the other appropriations programs work at the state level. If the funds are included in an adopted budget and then they're not expended, it requires what's called a reappropriation or a reauthorization as a rider to the next Article 7 language. And so because it takes a positive action from the legislature to carry those funds forward, I wouldn't count on it, because I do think that they're going to be, searching under all the couch cushions for every penny they can find. So I wouldn't be surprised if what's always been an automatic before, that they just roll the unexpended but priorly appropriated funds forward, may not happen this year.
So
what do you think? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Sorry, my internet's not carrying the video, so I'm sorry if I'm interrupting because I can't see anybody. So what do you think your opinion is? If there's the chance we spend the money and we don't be reimbursed the 20%, or if we don't spend the money, are they going to cut our spending for next year because we didn't spend it? Really, that nobody knows that, but those are two wonderful things about the state, correct?
Correct. Deb and I have had long conversations about this. As much as I would love to support her in this, I can't. I don't think we should front 20% because I don't think we'll get it.
So, Deb, what is the dollar figure on the 20% before the possibility of rejection here?
It's like 500 some odd thousand.
Okay. Roughly 500,000, committee, is what she's asking to float to make up the 20%, hoping that the state will give us the rest of the money, but Chris says it doesn't look very positive.
It's hard for us because the price of asphalt is so low right now that we could get more done. I get it.
Dan?
I don't know, this question is for you or Chris, but the 20% we're talking about, now my understanding at town level is there's three sources of funding. There's CHIPS, which is fixed in the budget, and then there's winter recovery and PAVE New York. And those are the ones you add in that on a discretionary basis year to year is what the budget normally is. Is the 20% you're talking about all three of those, or are we spending all of the winter recovery and all of the PAVE New York and 20% of the CHIPS we're holding back?
We are submitting for up to and over 80% until they cut us off on all of it. We always do extreme winter recovery and PAVE New York first because it does not ever roll over.
Right. So
that's what we have submitted for. We submitted for our extreme winter recovery first, and we had too much for that, so it rolled into PAVE New York, and then we're submitting for PAVE and then starting to eat into CHIPS.
So it's only, we're holding back 20% of chips, not 20% of everything.
Well,
That's what
it
I'm trying to
depends on
find out.
how the state does it, because when we submit it, it doesn't matter if it's extreme pave or chips. So if they're cutting us off at 80% of extreme, then it'll go into pave until 80% of pave is done, and then it'll go into chips. That's what the intention is, according to the last conference that we had with the county highway superintendents and our rep down in Albany. But the 80% is coming out of everything,
The total.
the total.
So it's a lot bigger number than 20% of chips.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Al, did you have a comment?
I wanted to break your heart a little bit more. I have a prediction for you. The 80% that she's getting this year will be next year's number as well.
Yeah, that was my
Well,
question.
hopefully you don't know that for sure. You're just
I don't know that
predicting.
for sure, but the writing's on the wall.
He's prognosticating.
Dana?
Deb, if you're still using 80% of the money, shouldn't that be up to about 15 miles out of 11? Because if you've done 7.4, you say you still have 3 something to go, call that 11 miles. You're not done after that. Shouldn't you be getting more miles for the 80%?
Oh, yeah, we're planning on doing more projects until we run out of 80% of the money.
Okay, thank you.
Jay?
Yeah. Go ahead.
The one question I have is, as Debbie moves on to projects, even if we don't allocate all 20% of the extra, maybe we should keep in mind that she only needs a portion of those dollars to be able to complete a project. I think we should all keep that in mind too, that there isn't a dead cutoff, because I don't think miles in a road or the actual paving project are going to have a tally running right that second and wait, stop in the middle of this road, you just spent 80%. I think maybe we should keep an open mind that we might have to dip into that money a little bit to be able to complete the last project. That might also end up being an option.
I will say that by the next meeting, I think is September 29th, we would know by then if we could even use the 20% because of time. Winter's coming, remember what Chris said?
Any other comments? I don't see a rush to write a check for you.
Oh, come on. Thanks for considering. That's all I got.
Okay, does anybody have anything for Deb? Al?
So last month, as you may remember, Chris and I asked you to open up a capital project for Deb's, what we kind of called minor road and bridge projects that are funded 85% from Marshelli funds. I failed, and when I drafted the resolution, I failed to include a very important resolve. With Marshelli, we have to spend the money first and then apply for it. So I failed to put in the interfund loan authorization in the resolution last month. So what I need from this committee is a resolution sent to finance to authorize an interfund loan up to the amount of the Marshelli aid for the capital project that we just created, 128.
Anybody want to make that motion?
I'll
Paul
move it.
makes it.
Yeah,
Kathy seconds it. Brian, any comments? All those in favor, sending this to finance? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Anything else?
Not for me.
Brian?
Yeah, so
Brian.
it is budget time, of course, and budget time can get prolonged even by the governor if he decides to change the date. That was one of the last things we seen. We hope that isn't gonna happen. I think the bigger thing, I think Al's probably right. I think if they're holding back 80% this year, it's probably gonna be 80% next year. He'd need a complete bailout from the federal government, which I don't foresee no matter what happens in election. I think the governor's gonna come up short on money either way. I think he's put us in a hole where we're not gonna dig out that easy. A bigger shovel doesn't dig you out of a bigger hole. And I just think that right now, we need to be a little careful and conservative and it's been the message to the department heads and they're all on board. They kind of realize that we're going into the budget season absolutely blind. We're going to try to bring to finance some numbers to amend this year's budget so we can look at what this year's actual spending plan has shaped into, so we have something to work off of, because we are getting no guidance to have anything to work off from on the state. We can only just control our own costs here. So hopefully we're going to have a better picture of how those costs are being controlled, where, you know, in what departments, how it's being done. And we can give credit to those departments that have really helped save our bacon to get through 2020. So that's kind of where we're at with that. And thank you, everyone.
There's nothing else. Motion to adjourn. Paul motions, Brian second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Hey, Matt,
Thanks, Jay.
Angie,